And we're live.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I have the pleasure of starting us off on our presentation tonight for our Natural Heritage System Study for the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry. And I'll start us off with a few comments on meeting procedure and some information on our agency, the South Nation Conservation Authority, while people begin to tune in. We expect this meeting to be less than an hour. We're aiming for about 45 minutes, but we'll see how things roll out tonight. For those familiar with our usual consultation process, especially when it comes to updating floodplain hazard maps, we really love the ability to meet people in person in their communities, usually in the closest arena or school, and to really sit down one-on-one, show you the draft maps in relation to your property, and talk about the things you've seen or experienced that may be relevant to our study. Obviously, we're not able to do that this year, so we are hosting our meetings online. But to help scope some of our feedback that we're looking for, we have created a few different online engagement tools that we'll review at the end of our meeting. For questions that you might have as we go through our presentation, we have two options for you. Your first is to drop a message in the video chat, and someone from our team will either respond to you and link you up with the information you need, or we'll try and answer your questions at the end of our presentation. The other option, which will be more personal, is to connect with us directly after the presentation on our project webpage at nation.on.ca/NHS. There's a reservation link where you can fill up a request form to meet with one of our team members over the next few weeks. There's also some forms available to provide feedback. We have two presenters tonight from South Nation Conservation, myself, John Messman, and I'm joined by my colleague Allison McDonald. And we'll be delivering our presentation by sharing our screens in a virtual meeting that we're broadcasting to our YouTube channel. I say this because since we are broadcasting our meeting, there might be a few minutes of delay for us to see your questions, but feel free to drop comments throughout the meeting and we'll get to them when we can. We've included a summary of some of the topics we're hoping to cover tonight. However, as you can imagine, there's lots of things to talk about in only a short amount of time. Our goal with this meeting is to provide as much information as possible to help everyone understand what this project is and what it is not, which will hopefully help you understand what work has already occurred over the last few years to create these maps and help you give you an idea of how to provide feedback and how we're hoping to effectively scope these policies to where they're needed most. Because the study area is in Eastern Ontario and it's very large, we are hosting one meeting for residents in SDG and a separate meeting tomorrow for the United Counties of Prescott, Russell. We've done our best to include as many topics as possible, but please understand that we probably won't be able to fully explore every specific area of interest, but hopefully this meeting will help you give you an understanding of what the project is. Please also note that all of these materials that we'll review are available on our project website, again at nation.on.ca/NHS, and are also available in French. For those maybe less familiar with our agency, we wanted to start off with a few comments on who we are and what we do to help you understand our role in conservation and why we were contracted by the counties to complete this study. We are one of Ontario's 36 conservation authorities, and we operate under provincial legislation called the Conservation Authorities Act. But we also deliver other work through agreements with provincial ministries and our own municipalities to deliver local environmental services. In our region of Eastern Ontario, we work for 16 different municipalities, including the City of Ottawa and municipalities in Leeds and Grenville, Prescott, Russell, and SDG, with our watershed jurisdiction around the South Nation River and its tributaries, beginning near the headwaters in Brockville and ending near Plantagenet, where our river empties into the Ottawa River. Our jurisdiction also extends to both the St. Lawrence and Ottawa River shorelines, and these jurisdiction expansions have occurred in recent years at the request of our municipalities to help deliver vital services like floodplain mapping and flood forecasting. Our work is also governed by our board of directors, which are comprised of municipally elected officials that are appointed by our municipalities. One of the main objectives of our work is to protect people and property from natural hazards like flooding, erosion, and landslides, and to support sustainable development activities through environmental and technical reviews to ensure that new construction is safe and sustainable. On behalf of our municipal partners in the province, we also study, map, and regulate areas with increased development pressure where there are known hazards, and we work directly with people to make sure that projects can keep you and your investment along with your neighbor and their property safe, while contributing to a healthy environment. We also complete environmental monitoring work to report on watershed conditions and environmental health. And we use this information to inform our environmental reviews for new development projects, but also to help us fundraise and direct our fundraising dollars towards areas in poor health, to get more trees along water courses, manage things like invasive species on our properties, and to restore important wetlands, for example. We also deliver different environmental stewardship programs through agreements, including things like roadside tree programs, water quality improvement programs for farmers. These offer cost share funding for projects that help improve water quality. We also offer things like ash tree replacement programs in the city of Ottawa, and probably our most popular service being our tree planting program, which is often what people know us most for. Through this program, we can offer a variety of subsidies. We can plant trees for as little as 20 cents a seedling. And while our spring tree planting season is still a couple months away, our staff are gearing up to plant the most trees we've ever planted in our agency's history, nearly 230,000 tree seedlings this year. A final slide for our overview. We wanted to mention that we are a public land trust, and we have been working to protect significant natural spaces through acquiring land since 1970, through partial purchase and donations. Some properties have been acquired for flood mitigation, some to keep them from being developed, like areas within the Castleman to Lemieux potential retrogressive landslide area, and others were acquired to contribute to a sustainable natural heritage system for public community benefit. We now own over 13,000 acres of forested land. We manage the SDG County Forest on their behalf and operate 15 different day-use parks called conservation areas. I also wanted to mention that many of our parks and natural spaces are on land that was donated to us by people to help protect and conserve their families' natural legacies. Each year, we accept more and more land through donations, and we're able to offer significant tax benefits through programs like Canada's Ecological Gift Program. I wanted to end with that thought because we've worked with some really great individuals through the years who have helped add area forests to the public trust. They've helped to conserve the forest for future generations and help leave an important legacy for donors. And if you have if you're looking for more information on this program, please feel free to visit our website. And with that, I will pass the microphone virtually off to Allison to start us off on our Natural Heritage System presentation.
Thanks so much, John. So I'm Allison McDonald, and I'm the team lead for our approvals department here at South Nation. And I'm happy to walk you through the Natural Heritage System study that we've been working away on for really short term in about a year, but it's been building towards the culmination for a few years now. It's something that came out of work we've done with agricultural forest cover committees and work with both counties on their official plans in the past. So without further ado, at a high level, a natural heritage system is really the connections on our landscape between natural features. And those natural features are things like forests, rivers, wetlands, and agricultural land. A natural heritage system is made up of core natural areas and natural linkages as well. And those linkages are really what's important as they support wildlife movement, biological diversity, natural functions, and ecosystems. This project is a unique partnership project. The two United Counties, Prescott, Russell, and SDG, reached out to South Nation to manage this project on their behalf. And as such, we also invited the Raisin Region Conservation Authority as they have jurisdiction within the United Counties of SDG. So between the four agencies, we came together to put this natural heritage system study on the board. And this was really great because it allowed us to be a little more efficient with public funds, but it also allowed us to create a study for a broader regional area. And I think it's important to note that the goals of the study really branch outside of just putting features on a map. They also recognize the fact that linkages and wildlife corridors are essential. We also took the opportunity to improve some of the environmental policies in the area and take the opportunity as well to provide a better scientific basis for land and water stewardship in our area. So really, when all the partners came together for this study, we realized there were a lot of areas we could work together to achieve more benefits than just sort of an official plan update. At a high level, I would say the intention of this study is to protect regional biodiversity, our indigenous species, and our ecosystems. And we also know there will be benefits for our climate change mitigation, including flooding and droughts. And as John was kind of mentioning, something that South Nation does well is working towards conserving a natural legacy for future generations. So we all know that we want to see these features maintained on the landscape and make sure that we have a healthy natural heritage system for all of our children and their children. So this project covers a large area, all the local municipalities within both counties. Our watershed is quite large, and you can see this study, we stretch all the way from South Dundas up to Hawkesbury and all the lands in between. So lots of municipalities were part of this, working with their local planners as well to scope the study and to review all of these maps that were produced. I think it's important to note that the natural heritage system is a requirement of the province. So the provincial policy statement, which is issued under the Planning Act, states that natural features and areas shall be protected for the long term. And that's really one of the key goals of the natural heritage study. It further goes on to state that diversity and connectivity of these features and the long-term ecological function be maintained, restored, or where possible, improved. So really the provincial policy statement sets out that direction at a really high level that counties have to implement through their local official plans. So why are we updating the natural heritage system? Well, the counties actually mapped their first natural heritage system back when the requirements were added in 2014. But at the time, they committed to doing a full natural heritage study to improve upon the basic system that they established. So our updated landscape analysis we've done as part of this study has better defined these natural corridors. And again, we're trying to lay out a scientific basis for how to protect these areas. We also realized that policy updates were really needed. We had to streamline development. We were seeing small, minor development put through onerous and expensive processes that really didn't benefit anyone or the environment. But we also noticed that these large core natural areas that were so important to our communities were not protected, and they were constantly being impacted by, large urban expansions, for example. So South Nation conservation was selected, and I think conservation authorities are really in a unique position to help partner on these types of studies because we function on a watershed scale. Your local conservation authorities in this area, we have a long history of working with residents. We collect data, we manage conservation lands, but we also have a good history of engaging with the public on environmental issues. As John mentioned, we'd much rather be with you at the community center, having some Tim Hortons and chatting with you in person. It's a lot easier, it's a lot more comfortable, and we really enjoy getting to know people, and I think that's our strength. So you'll have to take this as it is, and hopefully we'll get to meet with you, some of you one-on-one afterwards. But conservation authorities have the history of being boots on the ground, and I think that's why we were well positioned to take on this project.
Now, because this is a county project, we also wanted to comment on the scale of the study and the merits of a regional approach. The province has required NHS policies and mapping for some time, and if you check out our FAQ documents online, you'll see that we've included some different examples of neighboring studies completed with similar methodology in the city of Ottawa and Leeds and Grenville, for example. And if you look at our draft maps, we've also included arrows that show where we connected our draft linkages to existing studies. Natural heritage systems need to complement themselves in both theory and practice, and policy should ensure that the integration of natural heritage systems planning is possible at multiple levels, be it regional, watershed, subwatershed, or secondary plan level. And like all policies, they are guidelines that must also support field verification of the features identified. And I'll be honest here, we've received a few questions already from different folks around the inclusion of smaller community forests or other already protected features like areas of natural and scientific interest to be included in the system. As part of this exercise, we mapped as many potential features as possible and provided this analysis to our municipal partners. the county selected a progressive approach to use the top 20% of our map features to help select draft regional cores. Regional cores that we select need to be the biggest, the least fragmented, which means they need to be already connected on the landscape in practice. And they also need to be socially significant, which means, again, we want our regional cores to be significant, protected in some way, and partially publicly owned. Ultimately, this means that not all local areas will be able to be included in a regional system, but it's still possible to explore the significance of other areas, and some municipalities may choose to include local areas within their own policies, which is still a common practice. This might be an area where people will have feedback on, and we of course encourage you to let us know which areas you'd like us to investigate further with your municipality. The last comment on this, though this is a regional study, like Alison mentioned, this is the first time in Ontario where two counties have decided to work together on a joint collaborative like this to ensure ultimately that their natural heritage features that we're hoping to conserve are connected and similarly protected. So why does this all matter? Why is it important? It's one thing to have an open conversation about what do we value and how best do we protect and conserve what we value. But the true goal is to ensure that what we value, what we map, and the policies we update to protect them are implemented effectively in practice. We all know that our communities continue to grow. We have large communities being designed and built as we speak, and new homes coming online every day within the region. As communities grow and road networks expand, we need to ensure that we have strong green infrastructure to ensure a sustainable landscape. And we need to make sure that we're building our communities in the right places in the right way. A stronger and more resilient local landscape will provide us with a stronger legacy and hopefully economic prosperity as well. And thinking locally, here's a thought. I understand, for example, that the forest beside my parents' home in North Stormont will eventually be cleared for new farmland or housing development. Likely not in their lifetime, though possible, but there's some certainty that it will happen in mine. But what I would love to make certain is that the nearby Warwick Forest, for example, and the area around it will still be here in 100, 200, 500 years, and that it will still be naturally connected to other regional cores. Planning and development is a balancing exercise, and our involvement in development review is to find a balance between people and nature, economy and ecology. The benefit of working at a regional or watershed scale helps us to look beyond the individual site plan or proposed development. We need to look beyond the building envelope to consider the impacts on the remaining natural features that we have on our landscape, areas that we collectively will want to ensure are still around in the future. Using this illustration that we made, we know this: habitat loss and fragmentation is one of the leading causes of species decline in Ontario, and climate change is causing shifts in the ranges of our species. Roads make it difficult for species to travel safely. Urban sprawl can destroy wildlife habitat and farmland. Intense development can cause flooding. Development and industrial activity can also isolate or destroy natural features, and housing development can also remove productive farmland. But we also know that forests, wetlands, and other natural areas support biodiversity and can help protect communities from the impacts of climate change. We also know that intensification in urban areas can help reduce urban sprawl. Wildlife rely on large core features like wetlands, rivers, and forests. Wide corridors and connections between these areas allow wildlife to move more safely. Connected natural features improve ecological health. Farms can help bridge gaps for species to travel, and even small natural features like vernal pools and hedgerows on private property can benefit species. Ultimately, a stronger landscape will contribute to a stronger legacy. Our natural heritage systems provide society with many ecosystem services that sustain our life, and they help conserve biological diversity and help protect the movement corridors for wildlife and different endangered species. Genetic diversity is also only possible through genetic exchange that occurs between species that are able to move between these core areas. Different animals have different ranges and different mating needs as well. I'll draw from an example from our family farm, which is again located in North Stormont. Our farm has beef and sheep. I'm prompted to use this example because of a comment I saw online recently about how farm animals don't travel around the landscape and they're fine biologically. And I'm hopeful that most farmers or other farm-raised folks listening in will understand, some of the absurdities in a comment like that. Like most on our farm, we have to swap out our male animals, our bulls and our rams every year or two, or use them on a rotation with other farmers to ensure that our animals are biologically and genetically healthy and diverse. Wildlife rely on the same genetic exchange principles for their species to survive. And there's lots of different scientific studies that demonstrate these sorts of conclusions, and much of it is quite sensible and common sense. We did want to include a neat example, though, and we picked Alice the moose, as some of you might be familiar with her story, to demonstrate the range of wildlife habitat and the need for some large-ranging species like moose to travel to mate. The State University in New York collared a wild 700-pound female moose and released her into a wildlife forest in New York State back in 2000. From her home in the Adirondack Park, Alice traveled north for 2 years. She journeyed across the Canada-US border, swam across the St. Lawrence River, walked along Highway 401, and made her way all the way to Algonquin Park in Quebec. Allison's journey spanned 570 kilometers and demonstrated the need for connected pathways for wildlife to travel. There's more literature on Alice's journey that's available from the ADA Collaborative, which is again a larger scale NHS system that acknowledges the need for wildlife corridors. Now, Alice, like other moose, don't always choose our county region to travel, but we know there are moose and other animals that cross the St. Lawrence River, either in winter when frozen or by swimming. They're pretty fearless when it comes to crossing big bodies of water, and cross in popular areas in Mohawk Territory, for example, to get to places we know, like the Somerstown Forest. Though Alice passed away a number of years ago, her story is still a powerful one today. And when it comes to fish and wildlife management, there's always lots to consider. Different species have different needs. In Ontario, the province has directed natural heritage studies to consider 2 keystone species when considering mapping NHS features and corridors. Moose and fishers are commonly used because they have some of the largest habitat range needs. The hope is that if you can protect an existing NHS system that are designed to support fishers and moose, that your system has a better chance to support other wildlife needs as well. I won't get into a debate around the ferocity of fishers, even though I'm sure this photo makes them seem like they might be a cute pet. But know that fishers are native to North America. They have extensive ranges and are pretty picky in terms of their habitat. They need areas with overhead tree cover, ideally more than 80%, and they prefer old growth forests and riparian areas around watercourses within forests, both of which are a rare occurrence in our region. Moose also rely on large, mature forested areas for habitat, shelter, and food. Large natural corridors are needed to support these animals, along with wider corridors to support their movement. Now, this doesn't mean that our other favored or at-risk animals don't benefit from a strong, connected landscape. They do. From beavers to fish to birds and turtles, many of whom are endangered or at risk. There's also our honeybees that we have to consider, as they play important roles in the environment and the livelihood that we rely on for food and crop production. But in considering how much habitat is enough, we do have to challenge ourselves to think like a moose when designing systems to protect. We already know and can agree that we need forest cover, wetland cover, and healthy water quality to sustain life. But we also understand that our wildlife rely on large, natural, biodiverse hubs to survive. A simple comparison can also be made between moose and deer. Deer are able to travel through our landscape much more readily. They can rely on smaller woodlots, minimal shelter. Deer are a common sight and can sometimes rely on more isolated wintering locations compared to our moose friends. Truthfully, moose are located throughout our entire region. There's lots of them out there, but they do rely on interior forests and find homes within these larger cores, which form part of our discussion today.
So we're going to get into depth a little bit on these cores and linkages we've been talking about, and what really forms the natural heritage system. So these maps that we've prepared are based on these 2 components, a core and a linkage. Now, our natural heritage cores are large areas of natural cover that we expect to remain natural for a long period of time. We consider them to be our essential natural areas to protect biodiversity. And as John was saying, they're able to accommodate healthy wildlife populations, so genetically healthy and some of our large species like moose. These natural cores are often regionally and socially significant, and that means people within the area know about them, visit them regularly, care for them, and would be obviously very upset if they were gone. And it also includes a lot of publicly owned land, and that was a focus for us as well. So examples of natural cores would be La Rose Forest, the Alfred Bog, and the Lochgarry Marsh, which you can see here. So this map is showing, I guess our first version is showing just the natural core areas on the landscape between the two counties. You can see the two rivers, the St. Lawrence River here and the Ottawa River. We've got Quebec. And then you can see the large natural core areas. They are labeled, and the names come either from the features that are within them. So if they have provincially significant wetlands or areas of natural scientific interest, that was the name chosen. You can see Black River Swamp, the Warwick Forest, and the Lochgarry Marsh Complex, which includes Lochgarry Fen, Lochgarry Lake, Lochgarry Marsh, and a lot of other kind of adjacent features or large areas of wetland and forest cover part of that whole natural core. The cores were defined using what we call GIS or Geospatial Information System. And essentially we use these kinds of systems to do a spatial analysis of landscapes. We also used our existing data we have on significant wetlands and woodland mapping, some of that coming from counties, some coming from the province. We took our woodland and wetland features that were on our landscape and grouped them together, and we formed what we called complexes. These complexes were ranked, so the size and the degree of fragmentation within that core became a factor for whether or not it was selected. And we used this analysis to get our best candidates, so we kind of grouped them into top 10, top 15. The largest blocks that had the lowest fragmentation were selected to be considered as our regional natural cores. We then had those areas reviewed by ecologists, foresters, and our municipal planners to confirm that all the regionally important areas had been captured. I know there was questions asked early on about why certain local areas were not included, and John did kind of speak to this earlier. To be specific, the regional cores have a set criteria, which includes they must be a significant woodland or a significant wetland. They must be on that regional scale. So they have to be able to interconnect with other large core natural areas. And we really did try to focus on areas that had a lot of public ownership. And that's because we are looking for regional cores that will remain on the landscape for a long period of time. Like John was saying, in the case of Warwick Forest, something that we want to see existing on the landscape in the next 500 years, for example. These areas are already protected under legislation in the case of provincially significant wetlands, or through conservation easements and other public ownership. So a couple examples of local core natural areas in SDG that I hope many of you are already familiar with. If you're not, you should get out and check them out. The Lochgarry Marsh in North Glengarry. So this is a large provincially significant wetland, drains about 4,000 acres of land. And we note that the water to Lochgarry is actually supplied mostly through snowmelt and rain. It does offer flood prevention for the area and groundwater recharge, which is important, but I guess most important for the people in local villages would be that it serves as a drinking water supply for Alexandria and now Maxville. And we've noted a lot of osprey nesting sites and other bird species love to be around here. Beavers, turtles, moose, and fish all observed, of course, and also lots of recreational opportunities. So the trails out on Lakeshore Drive are fantastic, and you can get a look at the fen, you can get a look at the marsh, you can, walk through the beautiful woodland there. So very important for the local community, I would say even for the broader community, to come and walk here and get a chance to see nature and get some fresh air. So this core natural area provides a lot of benefits to the local area and to wildlife. The other core natural area we wanted to highlight was Warwick Forest, which is a smaller core area, but it is 1,600 acres owned by the United Counties of SDG, South Nation, and the MNRF. It's mostly a coniferous forest. It was replanted farmland that was unproductive due to soil cover loss. There is a wetland area. We have observed habitat in this forest for turtles, beavers, waterfowl, deer, and moose. And there's also timber harvest here. So there's other economic and recreational benefits. It was harvested, I think, just last month. One side of the forest was being harvested for timber, and the other side was open for families to walk, which obviously during COVID was especially important. So Warwick Forest is very important to the township in North Stormont, but again, also functions as part of a broader regional significance within both counties. The second component, so we've talked about the cores, the second component is the linkages. So linkage areas are natural and semi-natural, so some forested, some not. They're in the rural area for the most part, and they provide or have the potential to provide connection between the cores. The corridors include natural heritage features, rural lands, agricultural lands, and other supporting land. Without the corridors, wildlife populations may not be able to migrate between the large regional cores, and therefore they become vulnerable to genetic isolation, which John was talking about earlier. So this is that same map we showed earlier with our regional cores, and now we're also including the linkage areas between the cores. And this other version just adds in the watercourse layer. And you can see, especially within SDG, in areas where there's a lot of agricultural land, the core linkages tend to follow along the South Nation River, also the Castor River. So we can see where there's not a lot of natural cover on the landscape, these rivers become extremely important to link between. And you can also see on this map, I'll point out the connections to the adjacent natural heritage systems. So you can see here where they connect into New York State, Leeds Grenville. You can see the Ottawa connections here even shown extending outside of the map, just showing the importance of, even though we're looking at sort of this small area, the system is actually ultimately connected much outside of that boundary to a far greater area, I should say. So how did we select these linkages? Great question. A really fantastic and interesting method called the least cost corridor approach was used, and it is actually quite interesting. We'll go over it briefly, but we can't get too into depth on it tonight, unfortunately. We took all the land cover within both counties, land cover being, if it's an agricultural field, if it's an urban area like Alexandria, and we scored them to reflect the ease or danger for wildlife to cross through them. Natural cover got a low score, open water and agricultural lands got a medium score, urban areas and aggregate and highways were assigned a high score. The movement scores were also modified to reflect our regional priorities, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So when you take two regional cores and you assign them almost as anchor points on the landscape, this analysis produces a line that flows between both those cores. Those lines get buffered to create the corridor. And these corridors do tend to follow areas of natural cover and watercourses based on the scoring. Our corridor widths were set at generally 2 kilometers. We did reduce the width to 1 kilometer where it was within a prime agricultural area. We also ensured that our corridors linked out, as mentioned, to neighboring systems. So this shows the core natural areas in green and surrounded by black, and then showed all the landscape analysis that was done to essentially score the land cover. And so you can see natural areas had a low score, meaning they're easy for animals to cross, specifically looking at keystone species, moose, and fishers. Rural residential would be our small towns and hamlets, and those were given a sort of medium score. The agricultural lands, which are yellow, were given a score of 30, low to medium. Roads were considered difficult to cross, and the most difficult were aggregate pits and quarries, highways like the 401 and 417, and major urban areas. So that created this preliminary sort of landscape scoring, which we then modified. So if it was within a floodplain, we made it easier to cross. If it was vegetated or had natural tree cover, that made it easier to cross, so it brought the score down. If it was agricultural, prime agricultural land, so those are the lands identified with the best soil, best for farming, long-term will most likely become agricultural land, that put the score up. And so the resulting map ended up being more orange and green, as you can see here, And again, the green reflecting the easiest path and the orange reflecting a more difficult path. You can see the boundary connections as well that were made, and they exist all the way around the map. This is one small screenshot. And so what this GIS analysis, this geographic information system analysis does is calculates that easy path, almost like water flowing or lightning choosing the easiest path. You tell it where the anchor points are that you'd like to connect, and it runs a model through there. Some areas produce more than one option, whereas others produce clearly only one possible option. What we do with that is create this large map, which has a lot going on, but we've kind of built our way up this far. So hopefully you're still with me. And you can see the green natural core areas, the linkages in light green, sometimes following our major rivers in blue. What you can also see now on this map in light green is all of the publicly owned conservation land within both counties. And you can see in each of these cores, lots of publicly owned land, especially here. This is LaRose Forest, one of our largest natural cores. Excuse me. So this actually is the natural heritage system that we've come up with to this point based on our GIS analysis, based on a review by our experts, and based on some on the ground verification as well. So that kind of sums up how the maps were created, how the cores were established, some of the methods around our linkages without too much detail. Now we're just going to talk quickly about the other part of the project, which is how this is going to be added into our planning and policy documents. So the county official plans will need to be updated, and these public information sessions are your first opportunity to participate in this. So we wanted to put something on the map. We wanted to get our best foot forward and bring it to the public to hear from you what you think, to get your feedback and to see if you agree. And we'll take all those comments into consideration. We provide everything back to the counties, including a summary with our opinion, and they will be looking to update their schedules and mapping in the near future. So you can look forward to notices for that and more public meetings for that as well. But this is really the great opportunity to participate, learn more, and let us know what you think. For policy updates, there is a policy framework posted on our consultation page on the website, but generally we were looking at trying to improve the environmental planning policies within the area. We wanted to look at environmental impact studies, setbacks, buffers, and how natural heritage features are mitigated. We also wanted to include more supportive policies to enhance, protect, and restore the big natural heritage system. So really asking people to take a look at these linkages and say, yeah, these are areas we want to protect. We should do more stewardship here, more restoration here, and make sure that these water courses have great buffers and vegetation around them, protect them. We want to promote habitat conservation. We want to promote connectivity, and really we're trying to protect biodiversity in our area and improve our climate change resilience. In practice, how would most people interact with the system and specifically with the policies of the official plan? Well, it would mostly be if you were looking to undertake development. So new development applications under the Planning Act, like zoning, severances, subdivisions, would be subject to all the environmental policies of the official plan. And we work with the municipality and counties to review these applications. And one of our big emphasis with our updates is we want to make sure that consultation with new developers happens early and that people get the information they need to understand the requirements. So if you have a provincially significant wetland, for example, and you're part of this natural core area, you need to be able to come in and have a really good conversation with the planners early to understand, you know, do I have to stay 50 meters back from that? Would I have to do a study? How much would that cost? Just providing more information to people, what's on the land and how we look to protect it. For private property owners, there will be minimal impact in terms of taxation and assessment, which is always a common question that we get. Your property valuation would not change based on the natural heritage system. It's based on the features that were already known to be on the landscape. So if you had a provincially significant wetland on your property, that's no change. Same if you had significant woodlands. The mapping is really recognizing the connectivity of those things and showing it as important. It's also saying that, giving them an extra terminology such as a natural heritage core. But the property valuation would be looking at basically if you had a managed forest tax incentive or a conservation lands tax incentive, like all of that stuff would still be as it was assessed on your property valuation. Also, it doesn't impact your ability to cut trees or anything like that if you're looking to cut dead or dying trees or take firewood. Obviously, if municipal tree cutting bylaws were in effect in your municipality, which there are some that are talked about, some in other counties, you would need to comply with those. And in honesty, like the natural heritage system is really designed to enhance the quality of the rural character of our area. It's essentially trying to make this a good place to live for animals and for people. So it could actually increase property value by making sure there are these beautiful natural heritage features around, promoting public ownership of these areas. Obviously, people like to live near conservation areas and be able to take their family there, for example. So these things provide a lot of value to the community and to the municipalities. Another important consideration for this study was the impacts to agriculture and farming. And it's important to note that right from the province, it states that nothing in this policy is intended to limit the ability of agricultural uses to continue. So all farming activities are permitted within the natural heritage system, and we recognize it as part of the natural heritage system. The exceptions for construction of new buildings would be the same as it was before. So as I was saying, if you have a provincially significant wetland that's on a portion of your property and you have limitations for building, those don't change and aren't affected by these policies. I think it was really important for us right when we started laying out the natural heritage system to recognize that agriculture and private land ownership is the predominant use of land in the rural area and especially in Eastern Ontario. And we know that much of the province's prime agricultural land is in Southern Ontario. So for the east, the farmlands that we find in South Glengarry and North Dundas and everywhere in between are really important to our economy and they're important to our rural culture as well. So we recognize them right off the get-go as part of the natural heritage system. They're working landscapes and they do provide valuable ecosystem services, pollination, carbon sequestration, soil retention, wildlife habitat as well. Some animals move quite freely through these landscapes. So they do work collectively as part of the system and we do recognize that it's a valuable component. We also wanted to make sure that we were able to promote and recognize the agricultural producers who use best management practices. And we look to collaborate and work with these landowners to continue to protect the environment and improve the quality of these natural linkages on their property. I'll turn it back over to John.
Thanks, Allison. For those still watching, thanks again for tuning in today and staying with us. Before we turn to any unaddressed questions in the chat, and I know I have a delay, but I see there's only a few. So if you have a question that you're hoping that we can answer, feel free to drop it in the live chat feature in YouTube. Before we get to them, though, I just wanted to highlight our next steps and to share some comments on how you can provide feedback. We will be providing draft maps, the maps that we shared with you, the maps that are available on our website, along with some policy updates to the counties to review in March. The nature of the feedback is that we receive is going to inform our timelines, but we do really want to be clear and sincere in saying that we really do welcome any and all comments. This meeting, like Allison previously mentioned, does not replace a municipal requirement to host a public meeting to update the official plans, which will still be required before any new policies or updates can be incorporated in the future. Should you be interested in providing comments, and we really hope you are, we do encourage people to watch this presentation, to review the documents on our website, and check out our interactive story map, which explains some of the concepts we discussed and further. For comments to be considered, we simply ask that you use the feedback form on our webpage. We also met with some stakeholder groups in advance of this meeting. Some people have made some pretty good, significant local knowledge contributions that have helped us draft some of the work that we've already done. We're still interested, and we've got a few meetings set up already in the coming weeks as we prepare these updates for the counties to consider. We really did plan on doing some of these meetings in person, but obviously with the pandemic continuing to unfold, we will have to host these meetings online and by telephone as best we can, but know that we'll provide accommodations as needed. Should you be interested, there is a meeting request feedback form on our website, along with the feedback form that we discussed previously. We also created, and this was based on a popular online request, we designed a mobile app that will help you report local Keystone animal sightings in the region. We've integrated this app with data provided from iNaturalist, which is a popular app for reporting wildlife sightings that most people use already. And we welcome anyone to download this app. You can just grab it from nation.on.ca/NHS and download it to your device. You're also able to access it right from our project webpage as well. Within the story map on our website, we also integrated the results from this app so you can see where people are reporting their sightings. I included a screen grab from the results from a few days ago on this slide. And we've only made it possible to see some of the commonly reported animals like moose, turtles, and beavers to be visible on the platform. And what we've done is we've displayed them with the roadkill data in red. The red points on this map, and they are visible in the app if you download it, are locations where someone has reported a vehicle collision to the OPP over the last 10 years. These reports are often for larger animal collisions reported for insurance, but they do help plot areas where animals are often found traveling, and it paints an interesting portrait of our county and provincial road system. What we can start to see as people report their sightings already is clusters in areas that we consider to be significant, both naturally, socially, and in biodiversity. These are spaces that are already publicly available that people have gone and have seen animals. Larose Forest, for example, you can already see it. It's already visible on this map just based on the citizen reports through this app, which is really cool to see. And with that, I think we'd like to see if we can address some comments in the chat. And while we do that, I have included contact information from our project working group. Of course, at any time, you're welcome to shoot any of us an email, ask us any question you wish. And if you have any feedback, whether it be policy related or mapping related, we will link you up with that feedback form so we can best address some of your comments. Now I'm going to turn it over to the chat feature, Allison. And see if anyone wants to put us on the hot seat here.
I see comments on some of the best practices for agricultural lands like permaculture. And I think what interested me from Christine was her comments about road maintenance and cutting wind. So I know one of the things we do look to do is fund tree planting programs in municipal roadsides. And I know the county of SDG does actually pay for tree planting along many county roads. And one thing we look at is things like shrubs that might be used to cut down on some of the snow drifting, which does save the county money on de-icing and snow clearing, hopefully, and also creates some nice corridor habitat. So we're also looking at some grants opportunities where we might be able to do more of this roadside tree planting. And this would be an example of how we would use this natural heritage system mapping. So if we were looking to take some grant dollars, take some municipal dollars and invest them in this kind of work anyway, we would want to target it into a natural corridor area so that we make sure we're kind of getting the best bang for our buck in the areas we use it.
And I'm thinking too on the permaculture question. Many of our grant projects, whether they be the clean water program or tree planting programs, they're often designed for farmers, right? We know that most of the land in the area is privately owned, and much of it is great land for agricultural production. So we do our best to design our programs to benefit the environment, to improve the landscape, and often some of that best work occurs on farm properties. I think of some of our tree planting programs where we've done work along municipal drains on private property, helping farmers plant edible buffers, do grass buffers. There's lots of different ways, different things we can do on farm that can contribute to the natural heritage system.
I did see a comment about, do we have any power to stop solar panels or windmills? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. There's a lot of things we don't have authority over. There have been changes at the provincial level to the Green Energy Act. So I would say that things aren't quite the same as they used to be. But no, it's not something that the official plan or the Conservation Authority has power over.
Mhm. I see the next set of questions from Thomas. His first question was on the linkages and was asking if they were based on public land. Obviously, public land was a tenant for both the cores and the linkages. We wanted, wherever possible, to make sure that the areas we selected were already significant, they were already beneficial, and as much as possible, they were in the public trust already. With the linkages, though, unlike the cores, this can be more challenging. There are lots of public areas within the linkages we selected, but often, like Allison said, many of the linkages are going to run along water courses, which are privately owned.
And I think tying into Thomas's second comment there, yeah, there would be benefit to looking at purchasing some of the lands, the privately owned lands in that area. We hope that the natural heritage system, beyond being a tool for development applications, would actually help inform conservation authority land securement, county land securement, and we've also been promoting this system to other people who secure land. There's lots of land trusts in the area, so we absolutely hope that people would take this mapping and use it as a strategic guide to acquire land in sort of these most important areas. And if we could actually, get a fully publicly owned corridor, that would be fantastic, or mostly publicly owned. Because again, when things are owned publicly and with the intention of conservation, we know they're going to remain on the landscape, and that's extremely important.
I see the next question from Jennifer on our roadside tree planting program. And for clarification, Jennifer, this is something we've delivered on behalf of the United Counties of SDG for a long time. We've recently demoed a pilot in Prescott Russell as well. And the intent of that program was to plant trees on the county road allowances or county property along roadways. So most of it predominantly is on public land. And with the same tenant, we hope that these trees will remain on the landscape for a long time, but it provides good environmental benefit. It makes good sense for us to deliver a program like that, but it also makes reasonable sense for the counties to help fund a program like that. It helps eliminate costs for de-icing. It helps with windrows and snow fences. So there's definitely lots of different added benefits from a roadside tree planting program.
Yeah, this project really is sort of the first step forward. It's the first time we're putting a real scientific system down on the map. And I think from here, it's kind of up to everyone where it goes. John was referencing the possibility of having smaller local municipal versions of this study. It could achieve many different goals. For example, if there's a small beloved lake, perhaps up in Russell, that a lot of people really care about, how to get that linked up to LaRose Forest, for example, could become a great initiative for a public group to take on. So starting to take some of these areas that are particularly important locally to yourselves and create recreational opportunities there, create habitat stewardship, recreation, just kind of bringing it all together on the local scale. So the county has taken the first step, and as we mentioned, it's a provincial requirement. They're required to do this, but they've really taken it to the next level, putting a lot of science behind it, bringing it to the public, and saying this is something we care about and we think is important. So where it goes from here is kind of up to you, up to everyone. Do you provide environmental impact study for private landowners? So South Nation actually, well, in both conservation authorities here at Raisin Region as well, the conservation authorities provide a peer review of environmental impact studies. So we have the professionals who can do those studies, but we actually work on behalf of the municipality. So we don't work on behalf of private landowners. Environmental impact studies are prepared by private consultants. They're submitted into the municipality to support the work you're doing on your property, and then they're sent to our experts to take a review and give the municipality opinions. So we're involved in impact studies, but we don't do them for private landowners. We don't compete with consultants on that kind of stuff.
There might be a good plug there, Allison, to mention, especially in these counties where we offer a woodlot advisory service. This is a free program that we've offered for quite some time, and through the partnership with both counties. And through this program, we send some of these experts for free to your property if you have a private woodlot that you're looking for, maybe expertise, but maybe just a question. And often people will reach out with questions about how to harvest or manage or maintain their local woodlot, or questions around diseased trees or plantation requirements. And so often what we see with our woodlot advisory service is people will reach out, ask us the questions we need, and our staff will provide a free report back to the property owner that addresses the questions for their woodlot. So we can make you maps, we can give you a quick assessment on what's on your property, and often, depending on what you'd like to do, this could also help inform an environmental impact study, again, depending on the nature of your development or what you're hoping to do. But there's a great input there, and that service is free. And I might add, if you're interested, or if you don't have a tax reduction on the private forest on your property, let's say you have a 100-acre farm and you have a 40-acre woodlot on your farm. If you'd like to be eligible for property tax reduction on that forest, you do need to complete a forest management plan to the satisfaction of the province. And once that's completed, you can apply through the Managed Forest Tax Incentive Program to receive that rebate, but we can help you complete that report. We can help you complete that investigation, and we offer grants of $500 to people who are interested in that work as well. So there's a great tie-in there, which might help with that question.
I do see a question about how does this study apply to the issue surrounding regulations on clear cutting of trees. And there's a reference to both Alfred Plantagenet, and there's also reference further from Michael in Glengarry. So that question does come up quite frequently. I know a lot of people expect that that's something that South Nation conservation would regulate on a broad scale, but as we've pointed out, I think a few times online, just in the last week or so, the ability to regulate tree cutting is actually under the Municipal Act. Generally, it resides with the county for large-scale tree clearing, but it can also be delegated from the county to local municipalities. I understand that's the case in Alfred Plantagenet, that the responsibility has been delegated to the local municipality, and a tree cutting bylaw was being drafted by members of council in a working group. I know that that's kind of been in the works for a while now. And I think the natural heritage system has an impact more on, like I said, new development and tree clearing. So where you have urban expansions or urban developments, we're going to be making sure that these large natural cores are not impacted by that kind of development. We're going to make sure that we're introducing concepts around no net loss. So if there is a minor impact, it should be replaced elsewhere, things like that. Really dealing more with our urban and residential development more so. When it comes to clear cutting, it's completely up to the municipal councils, and it's something that obviously we all watch with interest. There are different ways to do it, and I think if you look at some of these natural cores and linkages, they would be prime areas to have tree cover conserved at a minimum. So they could be used as tools to create selective conservation bylaws, but that's really up for council and the residents of that municipality to debate and decide.
I see a question from Lynn related to roadkill along big corridors, thinking 417, 401, other big roadways, and whether or not there's ways to create crossings for wildlife. This is something that we don't see a lot locally, but isn't something that isn't implemented worldwide. There's lots of different, I think, of examples, even just in Quebec, with exclusion fences on big corridors to help keep wildlife from migrating across areas where it will be pretty obvious they'll have a very challenging harm to cross. There's also other areas where, cities and municipalities consider building passages below or above big transportation corridors. And in thinking of some of those examples, we don't have as many large corridors here, but certainly our 401 and 417 are still major highways and major corridors for our animals to cross.
And I'd say too, John, I do know that there are some large culverts, and I don't think that they were ever designed for animal crossing, but I believe they've become areas of animal crossing. So there's There's large culverts that we've identified in the 417, and there's also some railway overpasses and different things that we think are being used, and we did factor those in to the consideration of the corridors. And I think in the future, you may someday see a wildlife overpass on the 417, de just depending on how the urban area expands in Ottawa. So it may be something we see in our area to some degree, but I think one other cool thing I know the counties of SD&G have considered in the past is actually smaller wildlife crossings like turtle crossings under county roads. So looking at some of these natural core areas, they might be areas where we want to create smaller sort of culvert crossings that could help wildlife get across county roads, especially our turtle friends that we know are not as quick and fleet-footed as the deer. We know that the turtles do need help to get across some of these roads. So it's something I know the county roads folks are very well aware of, this road ecology issue, essentially.
And
Thank
even
you.
though we would have, scored these areas differently, sometimes, the transportation corridor is still ultimately the best place for wildlife to consider crossing. So definitely some work to be done on that front. I see a question from Thomas again, though it's up to municipal councils to debate and decide, would South Nation ever contact municipalities to ensure they know about the loss of trees? And to provide a quick update, there are several things we've done in the past specifically related to our forest conservation initiative that Allison alluded to earlier. We have written reports in the past that evaluated trends and changes in forest cover loss, specifically between 2008 and 2014, looking at the aerial imagery we had at the time. We have published a few reports on this, but more specifically, we did put together a few working groups that brought our municipalities together with our agricultural representatives. I think back to 2017, Allison was at the county back then, and I believe you chaired our agricultural working group, which brought together 24 different ag representatives from different local federations. So all of the different chapters for OFA, the National Farmers Union, Christian Farmers Federation, Union des Cultivateurs Francophones, all with a goal of providing some recommendations to our municipalities that were community-led, and lots of good recommendations came out of that report. There was a report published in 2018 that offered some suggestions for both the conservation authorities, South Nation and Raisin, but also for our municipalities to consider. And one of those recommendations was to take a closer look at the natural heritage system and work with our municipalities to figure out what we could do to better locally scope our existing policies. And in looking and thinking back to the debates we had with our community members at the time, many of these sentiments and challenges were debated by our municipal planners as well. We had a really great meeting back, I think, late in 2019 with our municipal planners to talk about some of our policy implementation challenges. And those are some of the things that this project is hoping to address, and like Allison mentioned, really locally scoped so that they can be effectively implemented where they're needed most and streamlined where they're not needed outside of these core areas. And to be clear, Thomas, we did send these recommendations to our councils. It depends on the local interest at the time and the local political will, but we've had some really good engaging discussions with different staff and politicians at various councils around this topic over the years.
It looks like the questions are wrapping up, John. I see a few people thanking us, which is really nice. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. I noted we had, between 60 and 70 people watching, which is really great. And I guess it's going to be available as a recording, which you probably already mentioned. So yeah, if there's no other questions, I guess we could wrap it up.
Yeah, well, thanks guys for coming out. Appreciate taking the time out of your busy schedules and hopefully joining us from home. I see that Allison isn't home, but hopefully you can head home soon. And of course, at any time, guys, head out to the website nation.on.ca/NHS. There's more information there. There's a really good feedback form that we're hoping will help scale some of your comments for us to consider. And we're really looking forward to moving this project along and working together with our counties to build and protect this natural heritage system. And with that, I think we'll end the live feed. Thanks for coming out, everyone.